The marketplace was a chaotic blur of colors, voices, and movements. Beings from all over the galaxy gathered under the cold, artificial lights of the auction hall, their faces hidden behind masks or sharp, glowing eyes. Their chatter filled the space as they exchanged stories, rumors, and goods from distant planets. But today the focus wasn't on the usual luxury items or rare artifacts. Today, it was on a living being. At the center of the room stood a woman, her skin pale green and glistening under the harsh light. She was not dressed in clothes but in chains, thick, cold metal that clung to her body. Her wrists were bound behind her back, her ankles shackled to the ground. The sharp, cruel glow of the auction lights made her features even more striking, despite the visible bruises and scars that marred her delicate frame. Her eyes, however, were the most arresting. They were a deep, fiery amber, filled with pain, anger, and defiance. The auctioneer's voice echoed across the hall, smooth and practiced. "Here we have a rare one today, ladies and gentlemen, a specimen from the world of Velcor, known for their endurance and resilience, a creature capable of surviving the harshest of conditions. Only one credit to start the bidding." His voice was cold, businesslike, as if this was just another transaction. A murmur swept through the crowd. One credit? That was absurdly low for an alien of her kind. The Velcor people were strong, highly sought after by traders for their ability to withstand the most extreme environments. Most of them would fetch hundreds of credits, if not more. But this one, she had been reduced to a mere token of worth. The alien woman stood motionless, her eyes locked with the auctioneer's. She had been through this before, too many times to count. She knew the price they would put on her. She knew how she would be treated. But this time was different. She had never been sold for so little. Something about this moment felt different, like she was being reduced to nothing more than an object. Captain Kyle stood at the back of the crowd, watching quietly. He had been to auctions like this before, had seen the alien slaves, the imprisoned warriors, the animals meant to entertain or work. But there was something about this woman that stirred something inside him. He wasn't sure what it was, but the fire in her eyes, the defiance, the pride, was something he couldn't ignore. Cale had seen enough in his time as a soldier to recognize the signs of captivity, the way someone's spirit could be broken. This woman, though, was different. She hadn't been broken. Yet, the bidding started. 1 credit. The first bid was taken with a snap of the auctioneer's fingers. 2 credits. The next bid followed quickly. The numbers rose, but they never reached a significant amount. There was no enthusiasm, no excitement. It was all mechanical. And that's when Cale decided. He had been sent here by his superiors for another mission. But watching this alien woman, watching the way she held herself even in her chains, something shifted in him. He wasn't here for another sale. He wasn't here for orders. He raised his hand. 1 credit, he said, his voice cutting through the cold air. The auctioneer's eyes flicked toward him, surprised by the bid. 1 credit? Are you serious, sir? That's an insult. Cale didn't flinch. He stared at the auctioneer with calm intensity. 1 credit. That's all she's worth to you, isn't it? The auctioneer hesitated for a moment, the weight of Cale's words sinking in. Then, with a shrug, he accepted the bid. Sold, the auctioneer declared. To the gentleman in the back, 1 credit. Cale's eyes never left the alien woman as he walked up to the stage. She stood still, her gaze unwavering. There was no gratitude in her eyes, no acknowledgement of the deal he had just made. She didn't expect to be saved. She didn't expect anything at all. As Kyle reached her, he stopped just a few feet away, his voice quiet but firm. I'm setting you free. The woman's lips curled into a sneer. Don't think your coin has bought my freedom, human. She spat, her voice low and threatening. You've done nothing but make a mockery of it. Kyle felt the sting of her words, but he remained calm. I'm not your captor. I'm not here to profit off of you. I gave you the credit to get you out of this place. The rest is up to you. The chains rattled as he moved toward her, reaching for the heavy metal shackles. With a practiced motion, he unlocked them, one by one. The chains fell to the floor with a loud thud, a small echo in the large hall. For a moment she didn't move. She just stood there, her arms now free, her posture still defiant. "Go," Kale said, his voice gentle. "You're free." But the alien woman didn't take the chance to run. Instead, she glared at him, her amber eyes flickering with uncertainty. There was something in her expression that made Kale wonder. Was she afraid to leave? Or did she simply not know how to live without the chains? "You're free," Kale repeated. But his voice now held a trace of something deeper, something more personal. She turned away sharply. But instead of running, she stood there, her back to him, her hands at her sides, trembling ever so slightly. For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, each caught in their own thoughts. Kyle watched her, wondering what would happen next. The silence between them stretched heavy and thick. Kale stood there, watching as the woman, who still hadn't turned to face him, seemed lost in her thoughts. The chains now lay in a heap on the ground, but her posture remained tense, as if she expected someone to jump out and claim her again. It made Kale uneasy. She had been through so much, and it was clear that freedom wasn't something she could accept easily. He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "I didn't do this for you to just stand there," he said, his voice calm, but firm. "I set you free. That means you can leave whenever you want, but you're not alone in this galaxy. If you need help, I'll be here." The alien woman didn't respond. She remained still, her back turned to him. Her long, dark hair, tangled and unkempt, cascaded down her back, brushing against the floor. She was a stranger to freedom, to a life without chains, and that terrified her. Kale wasn't sure how much time passed before she finally spoke, her voice quiet but sharp. "I don't need your help," she muttered. "I've survived without anyone before." Her words stung Kale, but he wasn't offended. He understood. She had likely spent her entire life in the harsh, unforgiving world of galactic trade, where freedom was a luxury few could afford. She was used to being a possession, a thing to be bought and sold, just like the countless others in the auction hall. But Kale had seen enough of the galaxy's darkness. He knew that no one deserved to be a commodity, especially not someone like her. Even if she didn't believe it yet, he had given her something that couldn't be taken away. The chance to choose her own path. "I'm not asking for anything in return," Kale said. "You don't have to stay. You don't have to do anything. I just wanted to give you a choice." The woman didn't answer immediately, but her posture seemed to soften slightly. She wasn't as tense as before, though she still didn't face him. Kyle took a small step forward, careful not to crowd her. He had to be patient. She had just been freed, but freedom meant something different to her. She didn't know how to navigate it yet. Kale paused, thinking for a moment. He had been part of countless missions, fought in battles, and seen the worst the galaxy had to offer. He wasn't afraid of the fight. But this was different. There was no strategy for this. He couldn't force her to trust him. He could only offer her a chance. "You don't have to trust me," he said softly, "but you can trust that I'm not going to sell you. I'm not going to turn you over to anyone. You're free to do whatever you want, but I'll give you a place to stay if you need it." Still, there was no response. Kale felt the weight of her silence pressing down on him. He couldn't just leave her here, not when she was so clearly lost, in this new world of freedom. But he couldn't stay here forever. His mission awaited. He had a job to do, and the galaxy was too big to let one person change his course. He took a deep breath and finally spoke again. "I'll be leaving soon," he said. "I'm not going to force you into anything, but you're welcome to come with me if you want. It's your choice." The woman stiffened at his words, and Kale wondered if he had said too much too soon. But then, to his surprise, she turned around. Slowly, her amber eyes locked with his, and for the first time, Kale saw something there other than anger. There was wariness, yes, but also something else. Curiosity. "I don't need a place to stay," she said, her voice still rough but less harsh. "I don't need your help." "Then why are you still here?" Kale asked, genuinely puzzled. She hadn't run. She hadn't left when she had the chance. The woman hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never been free before." I don't know what that means. Kyle's heart ached for her. He didn't understand what it was like to live in chains, to be a commodity, a thing with no agency. But in that moment, he could see how hard it was for her to grasp the idea of freedom. It wasn't just a matter of escaping captivity. It was about navigating a world that had always been out of reach. Freedom means you get to choose. Kale said gently. You get to decide what you do with your life, where you go, who you trust. She looked down, and for the first time Kale saw her shoulders slump slightly, as if a weight had been lifted. But a new, different weight had replaced it. She was still in the dark, still unsure of what her next step should be. You can trust me if you're. The next few days were tense. Kyle had stayed on the station, keeping to himself, his mind occupied by the upcoming mission. But despite his attempts to focus on his work, he couldn't shake the thought of the alien woman. Liz. She had stayed in the small quarters he'd offered, but she hardly left the room. She had refused his help, refused any offer of food or drink. She seemed to exist in a place of her own, somewhere far away, caught in memories Kale couldn't even begin to understand. Kale had tried to give her space. He had his own way of dealing with things, staying busy, pushing the emotions down. But he knew that she needed time to adjust, even if she didn't want to admit it. It was the third day when she finally came out of the room. Kyle had been sitting at a small desk reading over some reports when he heard the soft sound of footsteps. He looked up, expecting to see another member of the crew, but it was Liz. She stood in the doorway, hesitant but standing tall. Her amber eyes met his, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Kale raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at his lips. You finally decided to leave the room? She didn't smile back. Instead, she crossed her arms, her gaze shifting to the floor before returning to his face. I've been thinking, she said, her voice low, almost uncertain, about what you said, about freedom. Kale didn't respond immediately. He wanted to let her speak without interruption, let her find her own words. But inside his heart raced a little. This was the first time she had acknowledged what he had done for her. The first time she had let down her guard, even if only a little. What does it mean to you? She asked, looking him in the eye now. There was something in her voice that made Kale pause. She wasn't just asking out of curiosity. There was a deeper question buried there. It means you can make your own choices, Kale said slowly, standing up from his desk and walking toward her. It means you don't have to do what anyone tells you. You get to decide what your life is about. Liz took a step back, her gaze falling again. She shook her head, her lips pressed tightly together. I don't know if I can, she admitted quietly. I've never had a choice before. I was always just sold. Kyle felt a surge of sympathy for her. She had spent so much of her life as someone else's property, a mere item to be traded. It wasn't surprising that she didn't understand what true freedom felt like. The idea of choosing for herself must have seemed foreign, terrifying even. You don't have to decide anything right now, Kyle said, taking another step closer. But I want you to know that you can decide. You don't have to be what they made you. Liz looked up at him again, her eyes searching his face. What if I don't know who I am without the chains? She asked, her voice trembling. What if I can't find anything to live for without someone telling me what to do? Kale didn't have an answer to that. He wasn't sure how someone could find themselves after so many years of being used and controlled. But he did know one thing. Liz didn't deserve to live like that anymore. She didn't deserve to feel lost, to feel like she had nothing. She was more than what she had been made to be. You have a chance now, Kale said softly, his voice steady. You're free to make your own future. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be perfect. But you can choose to be something more. You can choose to find out who you are without anyone telling you. There was a long pause as Liz absorbed his words. Her eyes remained locked on his, the uncertainty still clouding her gaze. But something in her posture had shifted. The tightness in her shoulders seemed to ease a little. She didn't look as defensive as before. Will you help me? she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Cale didn't hesitate. I'll help however I can, but you're the one who has to choose. It's your life now. For a long moment, Liz didn't speak. She just stood there, her arms crossed tightly as if holding herself together. Kyle gave her the space to think, to come to terms with what he had said. Finally, Liz nodded. I want to try, she said. I want to see what it feels like to be free. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Kyle felt a small sense of relief, but he knew this was just the beginning. Liz had taken the first step, but the path ahead would be difficult. She would have to confront her past, confront the years of being treated like an object, and she would have to find her own way in a galaxy that hadn't been kind to her. But she had chosen. That was the most important thing. Good, Kyle said with a nod, his voice soft but filled with encouragement. You're not alone in this. We'll take it one step at a time. Liz didn't answer, but she gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't much, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. Cale stepped back, giving her space again. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy for either of them. There were dangers out there, forces that would try to use Liz for their own gain, but for now they had time. Time to figure out what freedom meant. Time to build a future, even if it was just one step at a time. As Liz turned away, Cale watched her for a moment, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She was starting to see the possibilities, starting to realize that her life was hers to shape, and that was a start. The days after Liz's decision were filled with uncertainty. She had chosen freedom, but the reality of it weighed heavily on her. Despite the quiet moments where she allowed herself to hope, her old habits, instincts born from years of being treated as property, kept her guarded. She was unsure of herself, unsure of Cale. Cale knew she was struggling. He saw it in the way she would glance over her shoulder, the way she would sometimes flinch when someone spoke too loudly. She wasn't used to kindness. She wasn't used to having control over her own life. It wasn't easy for him either. Cale had been trained to handle battle, to survive wars, to lead men and women into dangerous situations. But he wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared for the slow, delicate process of helping someone unlearn years of trauma. It wasn't something that could be fixed with a weapon or a plan. It was something that would take time. One evening, Kyle was working on some repairs to the ship. The engine had taken a beating on their last trip, and the fuel lines were starting to malfunction. He was focused on the task at hand when he heard a soft voice from behind him. I want to try, Liz said, her tone hesitant. Kyle looked up from the engine and saw her standing in the doorway, her posture stiff, her hands gripping the edge of the door frame. She was still unsure, still testing the waters, but her eyes held something new, determination. She was ready to take the next step, whatever that might be. He wiped his hands on a rag and stood, giving her his full attention. What do you want? To try? He asked, his voice gentle. Liz took a deep breath, her eyes shifting away for a moment as she gathered her thoughts. I want to go with you. On your mission. To see what it's like. To be part of something bigger than just surviving. Cale's heart beat a little faster. She had always been a captive, never a part of anything. She had never had the chance to choose to belong. This was a huge step for her. It wasn't just about her freedom anymore. It was about her finding a place for herself in the galaxy. Are you sure? Cale asked, his voice filled with concern. You don't have to do this if you're not ready. I'm ready, she said firmly, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of uncertainty and courage. I can't keep hiding from what's out there. I need to face it. Cale nodded slowly. It wasn't just a decision to go on a mission. It was a decision to face her past, to move forward, and to trust in herself. He knew that this wouldn't be easy for her, but he also knew it was something she had to do. All right, he said, his voice calm and steady. We'll take it one step at a time. I won't push you beyond what you're comfortable with. But if you're ready, I'll be with you every step of the way." Liz nodded, her posture loosening just a little. She still wasn't fully relaxed, but the tension in her shoulders had eased. She was taking control of her own life, one decision at a time, and that was all Cale could ask for. The next day, they prepared for the mission. Cale gave Liz a crash course in the basics: how to handle weapons, how to stay alert in hostile environments, how to move quickly and quietly. It wasn't easy for her. She had never held a weapon before, and her hands shook as she held the training blaster. But Cale was patient, guiding her step by step, making sure she understood everything before they moved on to the next lesson. After several hours of training, Cale noticed that Liz's focus had shifted. The doubt in her eyes had been replaced with a spark of determination. She wasn't perfect, but she was trying. And that was more than Cale had ever expected. By the end of the day, they were ready. The mission was dangerous, but Cale knew the risks. The galaxy was full of threats, and they had to be prepared for whatever might come their way. As they boarded the ship, Liz followed Cale, her steps still unsure but steady. She had made the decision to join him, to face whatever dangers awaited. But there was still a part of her that held back. Still, Cale could see the difference in her. She was no longer a prisoner of her past. She was choosing to be something more, to make a new life for herself, even if that meant walking into the unknown. "Ready?" Cale asked as he activated the controls. Liz took a deep breath, her hands resting on the back of the chair in front of her. She didn't answer immediately, but when she did, her voice was firm, steady. The mission was underway, and everything had been going smoothly for the first few days. The ship, a sleek vessel built for speed and stealth, was gliding through space with little interference. Cale and Liz had worked well together, navigating the tricky routes, avoiding enemy ships, and taking on minor tasks when necessary. Liz, still learning, had shown great focus and dedication. She was no longer the fearful, chained woman from the auction. She was becoming a soldier, learning what it meant to be part of something bigger than herself. However, Cale knew this wouldn't last forever. There were always risks in the galaxy, especially when you were dealing with the kind of enemies they were about to face. His mission wasn't just a simple transport job. It involved a high-value target, a bounty that had drawn the attention of dangerous people across the stars. He hadn't expected to bring Liz along, but after her decision to join him, there was no turning back. One evening, as they were in the middle of navigating a dense asteroid field, the ship's alarm blared, breaking the silence of their work. The flashing red lights reflected in Cale's eyes as he quickly moved to the control panel. "What's happening?" Liz asked, her voice tense as she stepped up beside him. "Someone's trying to track us," Cale replied quickly, his hands moving over the controls. "A ship's been following us for the last hour. We need to lose them before they get too close." Liz's heart raced and her thoughts flashed back to her time in captivity. She had never felt safe, not really. Even now, with the promise of freedom, she still found it hard to shake the fear. The idea of being hunted, of being taken again, felt too familiar. Cale's fingers flew over the controls as the ship weaved and dodged through the field of asteroids. He was experienced, but even he could feel the growing sense of danger. Whoever was following them wasn't giving up easily. The ship's sensors pinged with warnings, the sound of nearby objects crashing through space, too close for comfort. "We need to get to a safer location," Cale muttered, barely glancing at her. "Stay strapped in. This is going to get rough." Liz didn't argue. She had learned to listen to Cale, to trust him, at least when it came to the ship's operations. He had never led her astray before. Still, the fear gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the life she had left behind. She had survived by staying hidden, by doing whatever was necessary to survive. Now she had to fight to hold on to that freedom. Suddenly, the ship jerked, and the alarm screamed louder. A blast had hit the side of the ship, sending a shock through the entire vessel. The lights flickered and the hull groaned under the pressure. "We're hit," Cale shouted as he regained control of the ship. "Hold on." The ship lurched again as Cale expertly maneuvered them away from the incoming fire. But the damage had been done. A section of the outer hull had been compromised. They were vulnerable. "Liz, we need to make a choice," Cale said, his voice calm, but firm. "I can try to outrun them, but that could end up damaging us more. Or we can prepare for a fight. It's up to you." Liz took a deep breath, her mind racing. In that moment, she realized something she hadn't fully understood before. Freedom wasn't just about escaping captivity. It was about making choices, about deciding who she wanted to be no matter how difficult the situation. "I'm not going back," she said, her voice steady. "I want to fight. Let's do it." Kyle's eyes softened. "All right then. Let's make it count." He turned and moved swiftly to the weapons locker. Liz hesitated for a moment, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her own blaster. She had practiced with it before, but this was real. The fear of failure was there, lurking in the back of her mind. Could she really do this? Could she really fight? She thought of the chains she had worn, the life she had left behind. She had chosen this path. She had chosen to stand on her own 2 feet, to face whatever came her way. No one would take that away from her. Not again. The ship shook again, another blast landing nearby. Kyle tossed her a tactical vest and a helmet, which he quickly put on. He was already suited up, his focus laser sharp. "We have one shot at this," Cale said. "We'll make it count. I'll cover you from the cockpit. You take the lower deck. If they board us, we don't let them get past you." Liz nodded, feeling her pulse quicken. This was the moment. She wasn't just running anymore. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was part of this fight, part of Cale's team. She had a role to play, and it was time to show what she was capable of. The ship's alarms continued to blare, and Cale activated the defenses, preparing for the worst. Liz made her way to the lower deck, her blaster held firmly in her hands. Her breathing was steady now, though her heart pounded in her chest. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She was no longer afraid of what might happen. She was afraid of losing everything she had just gained. As the ship entered the combat zone, the other ship drew closer, their targeting systems locking onto Cale's vessel. The sound of blaster fire filled the air, echoing through the hull. As the first shots rang out, Liz didn't hesitate. She took her position, ready to defend herself, ready to protect her freedom. She wasn't going to let them take her. Not without a fight. The fight was intense. The enemy ship had closed in, its massive shape looming in the distance, firing relentlessly at Cale's ship. Liz could hear the blasts through the walls, feel the shaking as the ship took hit after hit. She gripped her blaster tighter, the cool metal reassuring in her hand as she prepared for whatever came next. Cale's calm voice echoed through her comms. "Stay focused. We have to hold them off just a little longer." Liz nodded to herself, though she knew Cale couldn't see it. She had made the choice. She had chosen freedom, chosen to stand her ground. This was what that choice meant. There was no going back now. She crept through the lower deck, her senses alert. The corridor was dark, lit only by the flashing lights of the ship's emergency systems. The air was thick with tension, and she could hear the sound of boots on metal as the enemy made their way toward her. The ship had been hit hard, and they were using every advantage they could to board. Liz took a deep breath and positioned herself behind a set of crates, her back pressed against the cold metal of the wall. She waited. Her heart beat loudly, in her chest, but she forced herself to stay still, to stay calm. She wasn't a slave anymore. She wasn't someone to be hidden away or discarded. She was a fighter now. A soft sound broke the silence. Liz's eyes darted to the hallway, where a pair of enemy soldiers appeared, their guns drawn. They hadn't noticed her yet. She wasn't sure how many there were, but it didn't matter. She had to take them out one by one. She took aim, her finger resting on the trigger. Her breathing slowed as she focused. These men were just like the people who had kept her in chains. They were here to take her back, to bring her into the life she had escaped. She wouldn't let them. The first soldier stepped forward, unaware of her presence. Liz fired quickly, her blaster sending a precise shot into his chest. He crumpled to the floor without a sound. The second soldier spun around at the sound of the blast, his eyes wide with surprise. But Liz was already moving, her feet shifting quickly as she closed the distance between them. She fired again, and the soldier fell, his weapon clattering to the floor. She didn't wait to see if they were dead. She couldn't afford to. There were more coming, and Kale needed her. Liz sprinted down the hallway, her heart pounding as she moved. She reached the ship's main junction just as more enemies appeared, rushing toward her with their guns raised. She fired once more, taking down another soldier before ducking into a maintenance room to reload. Kyle's voice came through her comms again. Urgent now. Liz, they're almost in. I need you to hold them off just a little longer. We're almost at the escape route. I'm ready, she replied, her voice steady. She wasn't sure where the confidence had come from, but it felt right. She wasn't just running anymore. She wasn't just surviving. She was fighting, and that was something new for her. The door to the maintenance room burst open, and Liz turned just in time to see 3 more soldiers charging toward her. She had no choice but to stand her ground. Her blaster felt heavy in her hands now, but her aim was true. One by one, the soldiers fell, their bodies hitting the floor with dull thuds. She didn't give them a chance to fight back. She couldn't afford to. She had learned that in her time in captivity. If you hesitated, you lost, and she wasn't about to lose. The ship shuddered again as another blast hit the hull. Kale's voice came through, sounding strained. Liz, get to the escape pods now. I'm opening the hatch. It's time to go. Liz ran to the nearest exit, her pulse racing. She could see the blast doors ahead, the escape route waiting for them. But as she neared, the last of the enemy soldiers appeared, blocking her path. There were more of them now, and they were closing in fast. She didn't hesitate. She took a deep breath, her mind focusing on the task at hand. She had come this far. She had made it this far. And she wasn't about to stop now. With a quick movement, Liz rolled behind cover, firing her blaster. The soldiers ducked, but they weren't fast enough. The first 2 went down in quick succession, and the others hesitated, not expecting her to be so quick. The remaining soldiers looked at each other, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. They had underestimated her, and that was their mistake. Liz didn't pause.